Hello, this is Mr. Stansbury. May I take you through the notes on rectangles, rhombuses, and squares? At the end of this, you should be able to say, I can develop properties of rectangles, rhombuses, and squares. Okay, so first thing, rectangle is a quadrilateral with four right angles. Okay, some special properties about rectangles is opposite sides are parallel, so these are parallel, so that means that rectangle is also a parallelogram. Opposite sides are also congruent, which we know to be true about parallelograms as well. Diagonals are congruent, so AC and BD are congruent. Okay, and then also the diagonals, as we know from parallelograms, bisect each other. So AE is congruent to EC, and let's see, BE is congruent to ED. Okay, so those are all special properties about rectangles. Okay, a rhombus. A rhombus is a quadrilateral with all sides congruent. Okay, so I kind of think of it as a square that got squished. So all the sides are congruent, but they're not all of these angles are necessarily right angles. Okay, so special properties about rhombuses are opposite sides are parallel, so also a parallelogram. Okay, so since opposite sides are parallel, opposite angles are congruent. Okay, and then the diagonals bisect each other, so they actually cut each other in half here. So that means that this segment is congruent to that segment, and this segment is congruent to that segment, and they're also perpendicular. So that means they bisect each other at a 90-degree angle. Okay. Next thing, square. It's a quadrilateral with all sides congruent and all angles are 90 degrees. Okay, so that since all angles are 90 degrees, it also means that this is a rectangle as well, right? And all the congruent sides means that this is a rhombus. Okay. Special properties of a square. Opposite sides are parallel. Okay. Also, the diagonals are congruent. Okay, and then also the diagonals bisect each other at 90-degree angles. So that actually means they bisect each other, and since they're congruent to start with, that means that all of these little diagonal pieces, AE, BE, CE, and DE, all of those are congruent. Okay? All right, let's put some of this to some use. Okay, example. Quadrilateral UTAH, Utah, is a rhombus. If the measure of angle UPT here is 4t plus 18, so this is 4t plus 18, what is t going to have to be? Oh, 4t plus 18. So, so we know that it's a rhombus. Since it's a rhombus, we know that actually these two diagonals intersect at a 90-degree angle. They bisect each other, and they're also perpendicular to each other. So that means that we know that 4t plus 18 has to equal 90 degrees. So let's solve this thing for t. Subtract 18 from both sides. 4t equals 72. Divide both sides by 4. And then let's, oops. Oh, sorry about that. And then let's see. Let's divide those both by 4, and 72 divided by 4, and see what we get. 72 divided by 4 gives us that t is 18. What is t? 18. Okay. Find x and y if ut is 5x plus 4. So ut is 5x plus 4. HU is 24, and HA is 2y minus 8. HA is 2y minus 8. Okay, so since it's a rhombus, that means all these sides are equal, right? So we know that 5x plus 4. So this side has to equal 24. It also equals this side here, but 5x plus 4 equals 24 is going to be a lot easier to solve. Okay, so 5x plus 4 equals 24. And now let's solve this thing. Subtract 4 from both sides. 5x equals 20. Divide both sides by 5. And we get that x equals 4. Okay, and then we can also figure out what y is, doing the same thing here, right? We know that 2y minus 8 has to equal 24. So we add 8 to both sides. 2y equals 32. Divide both sides by 2, and we get that y equals 16. Okay. C, find n if measure of PAT equals 10n minus 10. Okay. Let's see, find n. And measure of PAH is 8n plus 2. PAH, this one right here is 8n plus 2. 8n plus 2. And then it says measure of angle PAT, this one right here, is 10n minus 10. Okay, since it's a rhombus, this angle over here gets bisected. It gets cut exactly in half. So then that means that we know that 8n plus 2 has to equal 10n minus 10. So let's solve. Let's subtract 8n from both sides, and we get 2 equals 2n minus 10. We'll add 10 to both sides. 12 equals 2n. Divide both sides by 2, and we get that n is going to be 6. Okay? Okay, we got one last example, but let's take a quick little comedy break first. Okay. Example. Let's see. We've got AC and DB are diagonals of a rectangle, ABCD. Okay. Find each measure. So we're going to find a bunch of angle measures here. So, excuse me, since this is a rectangle, if this is 65, we know that this angle right here has to equal, these two added together have to equal 90. Oops, let's try that again. 90 degrees has to equal 65 plus the leftover piece right here. So subtract 65 from both sides, and we get that x is going to be 25. So this here is 25 degrees. Okay. Okay, so now that we know what each of these are, we should be able to figure out everything else, right? So D to A to B. So this whole thing right here, it's a rectangle, that has to equal 90 degrees, right? A to D to C, also 90 degrees. B to D to C is this angle right here, which is if we look at this line being parallel to that line, then that means this is the transversal. So 25, these are alternate interior angles. So BDC is going to be 25 degrees as well, right? 25. B to D to A, this one right here, is going to be alternate interior angles. This is parallel to this, so there's our transversal. This is going to be 65 degrees. Oops, that's 5. 65 degrees. A to E to B, so this angle in here. Okay, so let's see. We know that this is 25, and we know that this is 25 because these, again, are going to be all these 25, 25, 25, 25, right? And really the reason we know that is that this is congruent to this, because remember, diagonals bisect each other, so that means that this side is congruent to that side. So these, since that angle is 25 and these sides are congruent, that angle has to be 25. So to figure out angle E, we know that all three of these angles have to, well, not angle E, AEB. Let's call this theta for now. We know that all three of these angles have to add up to 180 degrees, right? So 25 plus theta has to equal 180. So 50 plus theta is 180 divided, subtract 50 from both sides. And we get that that angle in the middle has to be 130 degrees. Okay, so AEB has to be 130 degrees. So this here is going to be 130 degrees, right? And these two have to be supplementary because this makes a straight line right here, right? So just so that we can figure out this part right here, because well, let's see, BEC. Yep, they're going to ask us what this is right here. So that's going to be 180 is going to equal 130 plus, let's call this, say, y. This angle y right here. Subtract 130 from both sides, and we get that y is 50 degrees. Okay, so that's going to be 50 degrees, and then angle B to C to E is this one right here. Those are both going to be the same because these are also congruent sides. If across from this congruent side is 65, that side over here is also going to be 65 degrees. Okay? All right, that's all there is for rectangles, rhombuses, and squares. If you have any further questions, please feel free to ask in class. Thanks.